Hi everybody, my name is Ned Menoyo, as Nick said. Thank you for coming here. Nick is actually the first person I ever heard AB5 from. I mean, I kind of heard it floating, and he said to me, how's AB5 going to affect me? And being my client, I was like, I should know the answer to that question. So I glanced at it. I used to work in the state of Maine in politics there. And one thing I learned in politics there was that most of the time crazy laws didn't get passed. Like I didn't really, I took a look at it, I was like, it's gonna be okay, it'll be okay. And then Petro called me, who writes for A&R Worldwide, who you're gonna hear from later, because he did this amazing article where he asked me for a quote on AB5. And I said, now I really gotta read it, like for real, hard. And I read it and I was absolutely blown away. I could not believe that this thing became law. And so that's what these 14 pages of my scrawled Sharpie on a pad I did Sunday afternoon are all about. Please forgive the low tech. But I did take a scan shot of this, and if you put your email address down here, I can email it to you. And same for Peter with his article, they can send it to you guys for free. Because to me, I love music, I love musicians. That's why I do what I'm doing. I love the LA music scene. And probably you guys all do too. And it's killer, right? So much talent, so many amazing people coming into the city every day. And my real fear is that this bill is gonna stop that in its tracks. And that sounds crazily gloom and doom, but after you hear me ramble, or not ramble, hopefully I'll be coherent, I think maybe you'll start to see why I'm concerned. So, reading a law is one of the most boring things you could to sit down and read a law. It's like, okay, you got to really focus. So I'm going to try to I tried to take out the complete crazy boring, mumbo jumbo stuff, just boil it down to what you need to know. It still looks like 14 pages of this, but anyway. We're going to do questions, I think, after, if that's cool. And Peter is going to have a chance to talk about what he learned from talking to these other lawyers, because this is just my take. I'm just one lawyer, right? One guy. That's like one musician getting a piece of sheet music and going, this is what I think it should sound like. Someone else is going to have a whole different take. That's me with this, okay? So based on my experience and my reading, I'm not a labor lawyer. None of what I say tonight's legal advice. Like if you have a lawyer, or go find one, you can call me later, whatever, but this presentation is not legal advice. Please don't take action based on it, and think Ned told me what to do, because everything's going to be specific as to you and your circumstance, and you're going to find out why as we go through this too. All right, let's get to it. AB5, woo! It's going to affect the entire California economy. It's going to affect the entire California economy, and they took 1 year to run it through committees, which I think is like bullet train speed for something that's going to affect the 5th largest economy in the world. Every single worker, right? Signed into law September 18, 2019 by Governor Gavin Newsom. Main sponsor is a very interesting woman named Representative Lorena Gonzalez from San Diego. The intent was to codify, the stated intent was to codify, meaning put into the form of a law, the California Supreme Court holding in the Dynamics case, where they basically made a holding as to which workers are considered independent contractors. That's the easiest way to say it, but with every case law is dependent upon the facts that are before the judges. So they can have a holding, but it really, truly only really applies to those facts in front of the judges at that moment. So Dynamics had its own whole plaintiffs, it has defendants, and in that context, the Supreme Court held that it made a ruling as to whether those people were independent contractors or not, and what law would apply. But that would leave, if that had just been the law of the land, that would have left massive gaps for say me to go into court and argue for you, she's not an employee because A, B, C, D, judge, it doesn't make sense. And a judge might very well go, yeah, you're right, that doesn't make sense. And that could run all the way up to court before the Supreme Court again held, you know what, it doesn't apply. It shouldn't apply to an independent musician, right? So there was room for maneuver when that was just the law, but they went ahead and they made a law, and they used in my opinion, they used the Supreme Court's ruling as kind of rationale, as their reason for what they really wanted was to target Uber and Lyft. And the real targets were big, massive corporations they felt weren't paying their fair share of payroll taxes. Why is this important? If a worker is not considered to be an independent contractor, then California's wage and benefits rules apply. That means every wage and benefit rule applies. So being an independent contractor was you're out. Like, what does that mean? I'm not a labor lawyer. I don't do employment law, but I know from my personal experience, withholding taxes, withholding payroll taxes, withholding Social Security from payments, accounting to the government for those payments, filing a W-2 at the end of the year for every employee. That alone, right? We know that. That's if you work for somebody, you get all those things. If you're an employee. If you're an independent contractor, you don't have to worry about it. What was at stake? Peter, am I right? $7 billion, right? $7 billion. That's like real money even for California. $7 billion. Follow the money in uncollected payroll taxes and other payments. So we're not that $7 billion. It's Uber, right? It's the big companies who have all these people driving, earning money. And California's saying, they're paying that guy $100. Like, we want our 20 of that, which would be the withheld taxes. And that adds up so fast. I mean, that adds up to $7 billion, okay? The law goes into effect January 1st, 2020. Those some provisions, which are kind of vague and amorphous, it's like, well, no, this one relates back. This one's retroactive. And I think that's really going after the Ubers. So that Uber won't even between September 19th and January 1st, if you can imagine the amount of money that's going to be paid to Uber drivers, it's going to be something crazy. So California wants to apparently withhold the right to go back and get that money, but it's really unclear as to who else the retroactive. I wouldn't worry about that. I don't think that'll apply to anybody here. But we don't know. Anyway, what does this mean? If you hire someone to do something for you, and you no longer classify them as an independent contractor, you have to abide by the California labor laws as they are technically then your employee. You will have to withhold taxes, withhold other state fees, give them a W-2 at the end of the year. And what's the effect of that? Like, we pay a bass player $100 for a gig. We pay a session player, $250 for a day. Like, do you have the extra money to make sure they still get $250? Or are you going to take the taxes out of the $250 you're going to give them? So it's a possible smaller payday for every one of the players. If you play the hotel cafe, are you an employee of the hotel cafe? Are they going to W-2 you? I've talked to people at bigger companies, and they're not worried about it. They're already W-2ing everybody. So this doesn't affect, Sony Records. This doesn't affect This doesn't affect bigger companies that are already W-2ing everybody just as a matter of course. It's going to affect us. So obviously this will disproportionately affect independent musicians and artists who are always hiring each other. I mean, it's like this web of people hiring each other all the time. Nick hires me, I hire you, he hires them. We hire each other, we go to his house, we're doing his project now. He hires us. Like, not everybody's not in a band where everybody's working collectively, right? So it's sessions, gigs, producing, songwriting. I was thinking about it on the way here. I'm like, oh my God. I don't see how this doesn't apply to recording studios. It does, right? So it applies to recording studios. You're going to go hire, our friend Keith, go record at his house. He's your employee for the day. You don't have to withhold from it's insane, right? It's obvious to us, but I wonder if it was obvious to, say, Governor Newsom or Representative Gonzalez, who is an independent contractor now. Let's talk about where we are now so we know where we're going. Where we are now is there's right now, why you guys haven't even thought about this, is there's big gaps into who can become an independent contractor. I have the standard a little later, but when I say now here, I mean where are we now? After the law's passed. I'm going to kind of get to what you enjoy now is literally today, but in January 1st now, it's going to be called the ABC test in order to still be an independent contractor. I'm going to rush through this because this is legal legalese a little bit, but all of these things need to be met. Not just one, not two, but all of them in order to still be an independent contractor. The person is the person is free from the control and the direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performing of their work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. I think like, a drummer, technically, like say you're a drummer and you're hired, you could kind of say, I'm not under their control and direction. I play the drums. They don't tell me how to play the drums. On the other hand, if I'm the state, I could argue, did they tell you to hit the hi-hat there? Are you getting paid to hit the hi-hat? You hit the hi-hat? Maybe you are under their direction. I don't know. But let's for the sake of argument, say you're not. B is where I think where we're all going to get hung up. The B is the person performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. That's not like I'm a songwriter. I'm recording. You're a thing. You're a guitar player. You come in and play on my thing. Making music is in the course of my business. It's what you're helping me to do. I think like there's no way around that. That just kicks everybody into the employee realm under this test. I wonder if Peter agrees. He's looking at me. C, the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. That's kind of like, you're playing bass for other people too. So you would probably need that. But, so let's say B hangs everybody up for sure because it's not outside the usual course of the business. The legislature then goes on to have what I'm calling carve-outs. I don't know what other people call them, but I call them carve-outs. This is the law, but it doesn't apply to these people, okay? This whole law doesn't apply to these people. We're just deciding. We are the voice of God. We are saying it doesn't apply to these people. AKA occupations that the legislature decided in the law itself, they decide in the law that this ABC test will not apply to. All right, here's where I go to what the current test is, called the Borrello test. What will apply to these professions is the current test, also called the Borrello test, which says that it has like 11 factors analyzed. Not all the factors have to be met. The principal factor is whether the person to whom the service is rendered has the right to control the manner and means of accomplishing the desired result. So that's like our number A on the other test, where we can say, no, I'm a drummer, you're not telling me how to drum. Okay, boom. If you meet that, you're through. But there's others you can hang your hat on. Okay, if I don't meet that, I can hang my hat on this. I can hang my hat on this. Any one of them. Balanced out. And so that's why no one had to worry about this. So to the carve-outs. All right, this is the beginning of the list of the carve-outs. Any person or organization licensed by the Department of Insurance. That's just the first carve-out. If you have a license from the Department of Insurance, you're out. From insurance agents, insurance whoever, you're out. A physician, and so these are people licensed by the state. A physician or surgeon, a dentist, a podiatrist, a psychologist, a veterinarian, lawyer, architect, engineer, private investigator, accountant, licensed by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, securities brokers and dealers, investment advisors, a direct salesperson. What is that? I think that's a telemarketer. I think that's someone who is direct salesperson. I'm calling the consumer directly. I don't know. A direct salesperson. A commercial fisherman. Also does not apply to a contract for professional services if the individual maintains a separate office from the hiring entity, can be their house. Individuals licensed with a business license within 6 months of the effective date of the law. The individual can negotiate their own rates. This is starting to sound pretty good, right? Individual can negotiate their own rates or set them. Outside of the project completion date and reasonable business hours, the individual has the ability to set their own hours. The individual is customarily engaged in the same type of work performed under the contract with another hiring entity or holds themselves out to other potential customers as available to perform the same type of work. And the individual customarily and regularly exercises discretion and independent judgment in the performance of the services. That sounds like independent musicians to me. Subject, but only in the following fields.
Oh, wow.
Marketing. Marketing. It literally says marketing. Marketing. Marketing? I mean, that's a lot of people, right? That's like a lot of people. Marketing. That's like, I mean, if you're in advertising, if you're whatever, marketing. Human resources administrator, travel agent, graphic design, broadly, graphic design. This is like verbatim, graphic design. Grant writer, also verbatim. Fine artist, verbatim, fine artist. Painter, cartoonist, tax representative, someone who practices before the IRS who's not an accountant or a lawyer. It's like there are these licensed tax people who can go in front of the IRS and try to get your tax bill lower. I almost need one of them this year. But even then, payment processing agent, still photographers, photojournalists, but it's the 35 rule. You can only do 35 per entity. So that's why all these photographers who work for the LA Times are angry, because they're submitting 35 shots a week maybe. Freelance writers, editors, newspaper cartoonists also have the 35 limit. Esthetician, licensed estheticians, I'm saying that wrong. Electrologists, licensed electrologists, they do the hair removal, right? Electrologists, I'm not denigrating that, but they're on this list. So far, musicians are not on this list, if you hadn't noticed that. Manicurists, although only for 2 years, then they have to become employees. Barbers, cosmetologists, real estate licensee, anyone with a real estate license. I'm going to save this one for last, don't look at that. Construction industry subcontractors. So when you're building a house and you're a subcontractor, you're not the employee of the general contractor. There's a ton of requirements, but they're included. Referral agency, that's like, I like you come to me and I refer the plumber to you to a plumber, that kind of thing. Motor club services, AAA, I don't know. The Southern Automobile Association of Southern California. But this is my absolute favorites. A licensed repossession agency.
Oh, wow.
Repo men are on the list and musicians are not. Fine artists are on that list and musicians are not. Segue into the next section like perfectly actually, because this is all about mostly actors, which is the loan out corporation, which a lot of bigger actors have. So this is what the talent agencies were able to negotiate for their actors who all have loan out corporations. It's not called loan out corporation in the act itself, in the bill, but what it's called is a bona fide business to business contracting relationship. That's important because it's two businesses. It can't be one person's a person and the other person's a business. They both have to be businesses. For those of you who don't know what a loan out company is, what it is I'm Ned Menoyo, I'm an actor, right? I have a business that is called Ned Menoyo Services or Performing Services or something. And Warner Brothers, when they're making me some big, huge role, hires my company, not me directly. And that has a lot of tax advantages for me. If they pay me $5 million to do a role, I don't have to take it all year one as income. I can meet it out over 10 years and make it $500,000 for 10 years, that kind of thing. So there's reasons, and it may have some liability protections and all that. But that's why like big actors and even some big musicians will have a loan out corporation, gives them some protection from liability, some tax advantages. Anyway, so that's already something that exists already. So they carved out an exception for this. But there are a lot of requirements, and they all of them have to be met. The business, and look how the writing gets smaller. Business service provider, that's the name of the business. It's not a person, it's a business service provider. They're providing my services, but it's a business. Business service provider is free from the control and direction of the contracting business entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract. It kind of mirrors what came before, but I'll read it anyway. Both in the contract itself for the performance and in fact. B, the business service provider is providing services directly to the contracting business rather than customers of the contracting business. So I have to give it like my services to Warner Brothers directly rather than to someone that Warner Brothers is hiring me to work for some small person over here. So that keeps it business to business. The contract, C, the contract with the business services provider is in writing, okay? D, if the work is performed in a jurisdiction that, all right, this is, even if you are a loan corporation or a business-to-business person right now, this next provision might hang you up. So it says D, if the work is performed in a jurisdiction that requires the business services provider to have a business license or a business tax registration, the business services provider has that. So if like maybe you're an actor and you have to go film in New York, then that would be a jurisdiction. Maybe they have a requirement that in order to be an actor in New York, you have to have a license, whatever. I mean, this is a hypothetical. You'd have to have a New York business license to do that, okay? Wouldn't apply to acting in most cases, but whatever. The number E, the business services provider maintains a business or location that is separate from the business work location of the contracting business. F, the business service provider is customarily engaged in an independently established business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. G, the business services provider actually contracts with other businesses to provide the same or similar services, maintains a client and maintains clientele without any restrictions from the hiring entity. H, the business services provider advertises or holds itself out to the public as available to provide the same or similar services. I, the business services provider, provides its own tools, vehicles, and equipment to perform the services. Even if you're a musician right there, like the equipment you might need, you have to provide it? Like massive amps or whatever? I mean, I don't know. I don't know where you draw the line there. The business service provider can negotiate its own rates consistent with the nature of the work. The business service provider can set its own hours and location of work. You are not performing work you would otherwise need a contractor's license for. So there is an exception for loan out corporations, business to business. If you don't comply, okay? Okay, so that's it. That's the law. That's the law under which we're going to be living January 1st, 2020. So what happens if you don't comply? Ari and I were talking about this earlier, like, all right, is anyone going to do this? Well, if you don't do it, you're running afoul of the law. And I'm not saying that to be like moralistic. Like, remember Napster? Everybody who's downloading music, they picked like, if they want to be hard asses about it, they're like, Jacob, let's get him. He made $100,000 playing keys, in a 6-month period. Well, we're gonna go get him. No, and we're gonna set an example. Who knows? I'm just saying that's possible. That's why we all try to abide by the law. We don't want the IRS, dunk. California labor, California, what do they call it? The franchise tax board? Oh my God, what a nightmare, right? Knocking on your door. So it's not clear. You're in violation of all the labor laws if you don't comply with this. What does that mean? How does that affect you? I don't know, I'm not a labor lawyer. Someone who's a labor lawyer could probably rattle off, well, there's this fine for this, there's this penalty for that, there's criminal penalties for this probably. Probably civil, probably a mixture. What I do know is what it says in the law itself, which is, in addition to any other remedies available, that means like everything that I just mentioned that's in the universe of potential labor wage violation, they're giving another action available to stop you from doing this. An action for injunctive relief, that means they can come in and tell you to stop doing something under the court of law can say, you can no longer call yourself an independent contractor. And we're gonna like put a court order on it. If you violate the court order, you're in big trouble. An action for injunctive relief to prevent the continued misclassification of employees as independent contractors may be prosecuted against the putative employer in a court of competent jurisdiction by the Attorney General or by a city attorney, and there are all these things about you have to, I don't know why they came up with this. A city of 750,000 people or more, the city attorney can prosecute you. I don't know why can't a small city? I don't know. But the small city can if they're fully on salary. It's weird. But apparently that mattered to them. How did this happen? Like, why are musicians not on the list with fine artists for the professional services contract idea? That seems like a no-brainer to me. But the musicians union, they like the law. They liked it. They didn't want. They're like, this is good. This isn't going to affect us. For us, this is business as usual. We give the legislature our blessing, and so they've got clout, I guess, with the legislature. The recording industry, more than the recording industry, I guess, because they went toe to toe with the recording industry, and the recording industry didn't want the law. There's a lot of gossip and talk about how this went down, but I think the broad strokes are the AFM was against basically everybody else in the industry. Whether the Recording Industry Association tried to negotiate with Representative Gonzalez or not, it's unclear. They say they did. Gonzalez said they didn't. Gonzalez says that they just tried to kill the bill. And so if you're going to kill it and lose, you got to eat it, kind of like hardball. That's what we got here. Like, I don't know. Maybe they could have seen that there's going to be some bad consequences and not just created a problem and maybe amendments on their own. I don't know. But they didn't do that. So where do we go from here? I'll run through this and we can talk about it all later. But one idea is we can politically organize. We can lobby to change the law. Lobbying is just a fancy word for writing letters, making phone calls, having a common set of talking points, having a shared plan, maybe some public visibilities, things like that. That can actually be pretty effective. And that's how people get laws passed and changed all the time. Go to the governor, Representative Gonzalez yourself, our local reps and state senators, op-eds, public visibilities, things like that. And that can be something that's done in an organized way. An easy change I would suggest is adding the name musician or even non-union musician to that list of professional services, contractees. And then maybe not musician, maybe more than musician, producer, engineer, mixing person, a mixing engineer. In fact, we could put it right under the licensed estheticians. There's a nice spot there. There's another harder way, which is there is a provision in the law that I think could be challenged in court. Under Section 2A3 of the law reads, if a court rules that the three-part test, the ABC test, in paragraph 1 cannot be applied to a particular context based on grounds other than an express exception, the carve-outs, to employment status, as provided under paragraph 2, those are the carve-outs, then the determination of employee or independent contractor status in that context shall be governed by Borrello. So it's saying basically like, if you can't apply ABC, use the old test. And I think like a really good argument could be made potentially that like this does not make sense to apply this law to all these tens of thousands of independent musicians produce like an entire segment of the industry that had a limited seat at the table if it had one throughout the course of this. This doesn't make sense, and it's going to harm possibly the industry, which would harm the state. So it has a negative impact. I could see a judge saying, if I was a judge, I'd go, yep, done, applying Borrello. But you never know with a judge. And the problem with taking a case to court, it takes a long time, it's costly, and a judge can always rule against you. So the potential effects of AB5, I call it the anti-creative economy bill. Like we've heard about the creative economy. People want that. People pass legislation to get artists to move to their world. I mean, if you have a choice, this isn't LA is the only game in town. You have a choice between Nashville, Atlanta, New York, Brooklyn, Portland, Oregon. I mean, if you're like 21 years old and you're like, I want to move someplace where there are a lot of great musicians and start my career, but if I go to California, I'm going to have to hire a lawyer and accountant on day one just to be able to like record an album. That's like part of your cost now. Payroll companies. Ari and I were talking about what's a payroll company cost?
20% of what you
cost as much as 20%.
My CPA told me 20% of what you pay.
You can cost a lot of money, like to have a payroll company take care of this for you. Or you're going to become an expert in taking tax deductions and taking out Social Security and paying it to the proper authority and issuing a W-2. I mean, we all hear those ads on the radio for, I think it's like Patriot or something, who do it for you for a fee. But that's still a fee. It's another fee. And that's exactly like when people are writing legislation, they're like, what are the potential chilling effects of this thing? Like, even a $10 fee, a $20 fee, never mind the percentage, can be a chilling effect on a macro way for an economy. So I think we have an excellent argument, actually, why this isn't in California's best interest and why it's not in the music industry's best interest or the creative economy for LA, San Francisco, San Diego, the rest of California. And it could also create an underground economy where no one does it. Okay? I don't think the state's served by that either. So what do? I think we have to comply until it's fixed, until we fix it. I mean, that's my recommendation to you. I'm not giving legal advice, but comply with the law. I mean, we have to figure out a way to do it, or you get that knock on your door. So that's my thing. And Peter, can you come on up?
Sure.
So Peter did this. This is Peter Petro. It's hard to clap for, thank you for not killing the messenger. Shooting the messenger. So come on up here, man. Step in here. So Peter just wrote a really interesting article, interviewed a bunch of people. Maybe I could ask you, Peter, what about what I just said did other people agree with? What did they disagree with? What are the other thoughts on this from other lawyers you talked to?
Yeah, so 30-second sort of, this is sort of like a nightmare scene because I'm in front of a bunch of people talking about something that I know very, very little about. But let me, with that disclaimer, let me tell you why I think Ned's put me up here to sort of facilitate this conversation. I discovered this issue about AB5 actually talking to a business management service. And they said it in passing, and I said, well, what? And there was something about AB5, and therefore it's going to be this new definition between a contractor and an employee, and I'm thinking, if you play that out, that's insanity. And they were like, yeah, but I'm not really sure. And then I started to read some articles on it, and none of them really, they were either Armageddon or they were very vague or both. And so I'm working with a few publications right now, and I thought maybe there's a story here. I either totally misunderstand this and I'm thinking it's a lot worse than it is, which should be fine. Or this is either not worth my time or it isn't. But let me take a day or two and figure this out. And so I'm in a position where I could get attorneys on the phone, music attorneys on the phone, and some of them were not music attorneys; they were labor attorneys, and many of them didn't know about the law, were vaguely familiar with it. Some of them knew something about it, and So that's why I'm here, is I spoke at length, maybe 30 minutes on average, with 8 different attorneys specifically about this topic. And so I have stuck in my brain that information, and then I sort of put all of that into a very distilled version that I can send all of you, which is basically sound bites from these 8 individuals, including Ned. Okay, so that's why I'm here, is I feel like I'm one of the only people, and these are lawyers telling me this, you're one of the only people that's actually taking the time to look at this and try and figure it out and explore it. And even the attorneys were like, I don't understand this law, this doesn't make any sense, I can't see how this plays out. Like, these are people who do this for a living, and that's right. So that's kind of the subtext of like what you can expect from me. What I'm trying to do is take all that stuff that I just learned over the last 6 weeks trying to put this article together and make it valuable for you guys tonight.
Go for it, man. Unload.
So shit. I was on the way over here trying to figure out like what's the most.
He's a drummer, by the way, too. So.
Yeah. What's the most sort of useful stuff that I can I'm going to try to say as little as possible and give as much as possible with as few words as possible. So if and again, bear in mind, although it sounds like I'm saying this is more of like me speaking for 8 voices and me sort of, I'm not a lawyer, I don't have a background in law, right? So take all that with a grain of salt. Like, this is just me listening to people like Ned and trying to figure it out as a non-lawyer and then asking them questions of, well, what does that mean? What does that mean, right? So a couple of things that I think are very useful to think about across those 8 sets of commentary. It seems, and again, also what I'm not is a student of the law. I don't understand how laws come into effect, what happens when they're not quite, written in a particular way and they end up evolving, and what that process is like. Like, I've learned some things over the last 6 weeks, but I don't know a lot of things about that process, but I've become a lot more curious. That said, the law in a way to me is, to use a term that might not mean much, but it seems like it's a black swan. And what I mean by that is, it seems like it's written in a particular way where there's a lot of things about it that really stand out, that make it an unusual case of a law. For example, if I interview 8 attorneys about a law that goes into effect in the 5th largest economy in the world, they're all California attorneys. Maybe one was not, because I did that on purpose, but none of them can imagine how this law actually plays out. They can't see it working. Right? So that's weird. That's weird that a law that goes into effect in California among attorneys doesn't make sense. It doesn't play out. Anyone that's worked a day in the music industry can't see how you don't have independent contractors. It's logistically, financially, legally, contractually insanity. Like, it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't, none of the people I talk to are like, so there's this sort of collective sense of like, either A, it's going to be rewritten, okay? B, it's going to be ignored, for better or for worse, right? People are just going to be like, we're just not going to, acknowledge it or do anything about it until we decide we want to, and arbitrarily can do things. Or it's going to be a mess and people are going to leave California because it's either impossible to actually legislate and operate within that. The rules are so very gray anyway. Even if it was a legitimate law that everyone believed in, there's too much gray area. You very eloquently put it in the article, it's a law to be effective should be clear, and this is a perfect example of it's so unclear that you need, dozens of exemptions. That's another black swan. Like, and this is not me speaking, this is multiple attorneys saying, when you have a law with all that many exemptions, A, it's a poorly written law. Why do you have to do that to it, right? B, it seems to smack of some sort of, let's say, agenda of whatever kind, right? Why would you make a law where virtually, like, all these specific groups it does not apply? One of the things that when I heard it the first time, I forget who told me this, maybe it was, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, in a traditional employment contract, right? Who owns the material that's created by the employee?
The employer.
Yeah. Think about that for a second. And the instant I forget who it was said that, I go, oh my God. So you're telling me that as a default, anyone in the music industry in California, but let's call it the independent music industry in California, by default is sort of shoehorned into being an employee, and by implication legally meaning that everything they make as an employee, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. The more you think it through, it's completely the reverse of how the music industry actually works. So again, I mean, my take on it after listening to 8 very smart people get their head around it and that do this all day long is, it can't actually be like this. They can't, I mean, it would shut down, it would literally shut down to get it, even to try and apply it would be just a mess. It's such a funny thing that it's hard to even know what it's going to look like. But for the moment, like, I mean, that says that's the law. It's on the book. So, buyer beware. Like, you be aware of that.